Remember, in the course of discussing movies, the host will spoil plots. You've been warned. Listen to their screams. Greetings, ghouls and creeps, and welcome to Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dave. I'm joined as always, by the other host, Ike. Ike, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm all right. So today we have a special episode, another one of our franchise episodes. Today we're going to talk Nightmare on Elm Street. We are going to count down our favorite of the 9 movies from 9 to 1. Tell you what we think. Give a little information on each one and talk about each one. And then, to wrap up the show today, we are going to give a review of Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story, a documentary that will be out on Screenbox on June 6th, which happens to be Robert Englund's birthday. So watch for that and make sure you give it a listen. Also, here in just a moment, we're going to kick and have a Wives Rebuttal. Monica and Kayla will be joining us to talk about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And it's going to essentially, though, be couple versus couple, as Monica and I do not care for the movie, and Isaac and Kayla think it is a pretty good movie. And so we're going to discuss that, debate that, and see where that goes. So, Ike, before we dive into Nightmare, because we've got this discussion will take us a while, and before we get to the Wise Rebuttal, anything you want to throw in? Anything you've been up to start the show or anything? I'm not. I don't really have anything. I haven't really watched much of anything. Just been working and everything else, but I don't want to. I don't want to clutter the airwaves too much because, man, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, not much. I was going to say, just for people who are interested on a little peek behind the curtain, we recorded 2 episodes pretty close to one another because I'm going on vacation. So the next time I talk to you guys after this episode, I will have come back from vacation. So that's fun. But otherwise, no, nothing new.
Yeah. There's just not been enough time for us to really do anything else since the last recording, but we had to kind of pre-record something a little earlier than usual, and it just worked out well getting to do this. We got a screener link to watch this documentary that's getting ready to come out, which led to wanting to do a Nightmare countdown. So it all worked out that we were able to actually pre-record and put something up that's still relevant. That's remarkable.
It is.
So, but before we get to our countdown and our review, let's jump in to our special segment this episode. Wives Rebuttal. All right, on this episode, we have another installment of our Wives Rebuttal segment. And this was going to tie into our discussion today of Nightmare on Elm Street, the franchise. Particularly, it's going to tie into a discussion on the remake from 2010. But it's a little unique today because instead of wives versus husbands, it's going to be couple versus couple because we're very split on our opinions on this movie. So joining us is my wife, Monica. Hello, Monica.
Hello.
And joining us is Ike's wife, Kayla. Hello, Kayla.
Hi.
It sounds very timid. We're these strong, boisterous, and Kayla's just come in there like, hi.
She's sitting there like, oh, Isaac, are you going to be quiet? Am I allowed to talk?
I'll be quiet.
To be fair, I don't know how a person can get a word in edgewise with the 3 of us. But we'll see. This may be like last installment where it was just pretty much Ike and Monica. So
it's possible.
That's the first time, but that's all it was. But anyway, we're going to discuss the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it, because we'll talk about it more in our rankings. But this is one that Ike and I there had to be some consolation on my part because, to be frank, I fucking hate this movie, and Monica joins me in that wish. But Ike and Kayla like the movie, so that's why it's a couple versus couple thing here, young versus old. Whatever you want to call it, on the merits of the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake. So let's let our guest start first, Ike. Which one of you wants to pipe in first and give your opinions on this movie?
I can already hear Monica chomping at the bit, so why don't we let her go first?
Yeah, she's trying to be polite and see if Kayla will come up, but we all know that Monica's been raring to go.
Oh yeah. Okay,
all right, Monica, you're representing here, so make sure you.
Okay, so to be honest, let's start out with I love Nightmare on Elm Street, the original movie. Obviously, at my age, I was there when it came out in the theater and saw it in the theater, and it was just amazing. It scared me. It was fantastic. It was well acted, well written, well produced, and especially at a time.
Monica, let me interrupt you real quick. For our listeners' sake, because everyone on the call might have an idea of this. For our listeners' sake, Monica really holds the opinion, honestly, that Nightmare on Elm Street should have been a trilogy and stopped there, and after 3, it's pretty worthless. But that's another hot take for another time. That's not what we're discussing today.
So I love this movie, and when you think about the effects that they had available to them, it was fantastic. We didn't have the special effects back then. So, and we walked uphill barefoot to school. I know. So I was so excited when this was going to come out, and I'm like, okay. But then they're like, no Robert Englund. How do you have a Nightmare on Elm Street without Robert Englund? I mean, let's just start. That is the very first thing. That is there are few movies that the killer is so known to the actor, and yeah, there were Jason Voorhees that were better than others, but it wasn't, that actor didn't make that role. Halloween, same thing. There were some that were better than others, but that actor didn't make the role. Freddy Krueger is Robert Englund. So what the hell were they doing screwing with that? So that right there for me put this movie from like a possible 10 to the highest I was going to like it was going to be a 5. And then when you look at the rest of the cast, this movie should have been good. You had Rooney Mara, you had Kyle Gagner, you had Katie Cassidy, you had Kellen Lutz, you had Connie Britton, Clancy Brown, Christian Stoll. You had a really good cast. And the movie literally sucked balls.
I don't remember that part of the movie. You said literally. I don't remember ball sucking in the movie, but.
Well, did you not? And that's another thing I have a problem with.
Ball sucking?
Well, I want to each their own. But when this movie, we know Freddy's backstory. We know that he was heinous to kids and all that. You did not need to go into the graphic details of why Freddy Krueger was a bad guy, because we know why Freddy Krueger was a bad guy. There was no need to get into the gratuitous, details of him molesting the children and all of that stuff. It wasn't needed. It was pure gratuitous information.
Let me add my part to this. Here's my thing. You're 100% correct. It has a great cast. I love everybody. Pretty much is in it. Everybody. And Robert Englund kind of gave his blessing. He said it was time to remake it. He was happy with casting, but of course, he's a professional, so he probably would say that regardless.
Right.
My big thing is the script in the movie is just boring. It is so boring. It takes forever. It's not scary. They try to remake too many little of the cliches from the other movies to put in there. They don't work. And I don't know. It's just a chore for me to watch because it is so damn boring and it's so hard for me to get through it. And I don't know. I don't feel like, I don't know. And Freddy looked weird as hell too. I didn't like the new makeup. He looked odd and everything else. So I don't know. It was just, I just don't like the movie at all. I mean, it bores me. So, all right. So, Kayla, do you want to counter?
Sure. So, I feel like we need to look at this movie as new eyes. You even said that you guys went to the theater and watched it. But I feel like this movie brings in an audience for like new horror fans that might have not seen the original, that weren't alive when it came out, aka me. So I just feel like it still tells the story of Nightmare on Elm Street, but in a different lens to kind of direct it towards a younger audience.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, I guess to add to that, but also to rebuke some of the claims that had been previously made. I think it's important that in these instances, you have these, you have a movie, right? You have a Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. They had done, a bajillion sequels. Some were better than others. And definitely there are some that are more worthy than others. But what I would definitely say that kind of struck me about the conversation so far is the reference to Robert Englund not being in the remake. Now, obviously, I don't know. I did a little research because I knew that was going to be something that you guys brought up. But I'm going to be honest. Robert Englund turned down the role. He was offered the role of reprising Freddy in this movie. And he distinctly turned down the role because he was not keen on doing a remake, which is fine. So I think my only issue with that point is, yeah, it sucks that he wasn't there, but he was not interested in the role. So then you have to go to the next best option, which was, in this case, Jackie Earle Haley, which, even if you don't like him, Jackie Earle Haley did a fantastic job at portraying this version of Freddy Krueger. Not to mention, I think that he looks like an actual burn victim, whereas Robert Englund's infamous look looks like someone who has just like severe like plaque psoriasis or something.
I agree with that.
And don't get me wrong, I love Robert Englund's Freddy, and I think he looks spooky as hell. I think he looks fucking great. But what I'm saying is that the new Freddy looks like an actual burn victim, whereas again, the original Nightmare, not as much. It does a little bit, but I mean, I see where they were going.
I feel like he looks more like a monster,
right,
than like a burn victim.
Because I think that's the point. Freddy Krueger is a monster, and you're right.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that's all well and good, but we're talking about a guy that haunts dreams. I don't think realism is what we need here. I don't think that's necessary, and I don't know. I don't go places to see figures of the new Freddy because it's not a good look. It doesn't look good. It looks hokey. It looks like they charred a stick and put a sweater on it. It doesn't look right. And I get the intent behind the movie, right? But sign number one, if Robert Englund turned it down, that might have been a sign of I don't know, maybe this is not a good idea.
Yes.
Maybe we should have listened to the guy.
Yes.
And I understand that there may have been some intent to try to get younger eyes. I don't think it worked because we haven't had any of the others. There's been no more. They've not made another after this one, no sequels, whatever else, because nobody wants to see it. And I just don't. I don't know. I think to me, Nightmare on Elm Street, whether what you like or you don't like, I think it's just a unique franchise that I think it's had its run. I really do. I think it's because I think the way they positioned it and the way they made it, it's just so tied with Robert Englund and the way he portrayed it. I think maybe it's a concept that should maybe just be left kind of dormant. And I don't know if you could do anything that's going to satisfy people. And because I don't know, even if the movie wasn't boring, I'm still going to have that gripe that it wasn't him playing Freddy. And there's just, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just, my opinion, my nostalgia, whether it is or it isn't. And I don't know that there's a good way to redo this, to bring it back to life, because it's become so tied with him. And
but not only, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I think it's, and I'm not saying that's the right philosophy or the right or whatever. I'm just saying it makes the creators, it puts them in a difficult position because of just what it is, and it's so intertwined. Like you said earlier, whoever said it, Jason, you see Jason, you don't see anything but the mask. Michael Myers, you see the mask. Freddy is it's a layer on Robert Englund that gives that kind of that uniqueness, and it's become so tied to him. I just think it's tricky and it's hard.
The other two don't talk. Robert Englund does, and as Freddy, you also have to remember, I hate this movie because it's a bad movie. We're talking about a movie that went through 15 rewrites. We're talking about a movie that when it came out, half the cast wouldn't even do publicity for it. What's her name? Rooney Mara said she hated this movie so much she almost quit acting. You know, Robert Englund turned it down after he read the script. Heather Langenkamp was supposed to have a cameo. She turned it down after she read the script. Wes Craven said that they didn't even have, he signed away his rights to this movie to finance it. But they didn't even come to him before making this movie. He didn't even know about it until it was well into production.
Yeah.
You know,
my hangups, I mean, it's just an opinion, a matter of opinion. I just don't like the movie itself. Even if Robert Englund was in it, that's only going to take it so much. It's still, to me, it was a boring script and a boring telling. It just didn't, I don't know, it didn't have an energy to it that I like. And I know, and I understand some people like it, and that's fine. It's, I mean, for crying out loud, one of my favorites is Dream Warriors, and I'm not saying that's the best, but I love it. And it is what it is. I mean, it's hokey and whatever. It's just a matter of taste. I just think, regardless of anything else, to me, it was just it was boring, and I didn't like it for that reason. So.
I guess my only other thing that I would say is, I at the end of the day, I'm sorry that Rooney Mara apparently didn't like her portrayal in this movie. I don't know. At the end of the day, the movie, it's a movie. You know what I mean? And I'm a very large proponent of, like you said, if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you like it, you like it. That is what it is. I don't think that, truthfully, the movie is entirely reminiscent of the original. There are some essentially shot-for-shot remakes from the original film. The pretty famous, Freddy coming through the wall. Obviously, the original was a practical effect. This one was not. The essential story is essentially the same. Freddy is haunting these people's nightmares, and the lead character is sort of is kind of destined to be the final girl, and and everything else, and that's that's perfect. That's what it is. That's what the purpose of the movie was. But what I would add to that is that if because I've heard the argument, the script isn't good or the movie wasn't good, and my only response to that is, if this script and this movie was not good, then you're going to have a hard time getting somebody to like the first one. Now, if it were not for nostalgia, because that's what you guys are going off of, right? You have that nostalgia. You have that original love of the movie because it came out when you were a kid.
There's no nostalgia. No. It was a good movie.
Yeah, I don't think it's purely nostalgia. I don't think that's. I don't know. Well, yes, the script and whatever is boring, but I think it's also very poorly executed. Even at that, there's just not an energy. There's not, and I think part of that can be just played into the fact that you're recreating something that already exists, and it's and no matter when you do that, it's tough, right? I would imagine to have a spark, because you are recreating something, and you're worried about that. And maybe it takes away a little of that artist license, to have a little energy in it. Maybe, I don't know. I think in this day and age, I know that wasn't really a thing in 2010. Maybe I don't know that, but the new requel philosophy of things, where you're trying to do hybrids and mixes and not a reboot, not a remake. I think that would have worked better, but it wasn't really a thing then. I think they needed to kind of put their own stamp on it a little bit while paying homage to the original. And I just think it was too much trying to retell the original, and I don't know, it was like a high school theater play trying to put on a poor production of it, and it didn't work.
Well, and remember that we're leaving out one of the contributing factors is Michael Bay produced this movie.
Well, I didn't see nearly enough explosions from Michael Bay.
See, and he is known for trying to be over the top with shit.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, you can't really pull this is Michael Bay. I mean, Michael Bay gave us really great films. I mean, Armageddon, a lot of the Transformers movies. I mean, he worked on The Quiet Place. He worked on The Purge. I mean, I don't think that that's a relative factor. While I understand that some people may not like Michael Bay, I don't think that in any way, shape, or form he had any. There was nothing about this movie screams Michael Bay, in my opinion. I think that he was probably brought on as a producer for whatever reason. He's probably friends with somebody, and that's fine. But I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I hate the Michael Bay argument. I hate when people bring up, oh, well, Michael Bay was a part of this. I hate Michael Bay. Like, I get it. Michael Bay isn't always the best, but he's given us some good stuff. But back to kind of the meat of the argument, I think this is truthfully a young versus old kind of situation. I don't mean that disrespectfully. The original came out when you guys were younger. This came out during that same period for Kayla and I. Mm-hmm. And I think that for Kayla, for somebody, and Kayla can even attest to this, Kayla was not a huge horror connoisseur, if you will. She is now. She's seen all the horror movies. She's seen most of the classics and everything else.
Wait a minute, hold on. Kayla, you've seen all the horror movies? Good Lord.
Every single one.
I mean, I just literally said you've seen them all. That is quite an accomplishment. Way to go, Kayla.
But
thank you.
But you know what I mean. She's seen the building block.
I promise you, when they call to give you your award and your medal for that accomplishment, we'll break in here and do that live on the show and let them do that, because that's
right.
All the horror movies.
But you know what I mean, though. Yeah, she's seen the building block films. She's seen the movies that are necessary to get that appreciation of horror, and I think that especially from her perspective, it's hard for her to enjoy some of these older movies, and it's the same way for a lot of people in this generation. The younger millennials and Gen Z and the coming Gen Alpha will not have the appreciation for these horror movies that older millennials, Gen X, and boomers and whatnot have for them. It's the same argument in the 80s when everyone was like, oh well, this is no Psycho, you know what I mean? And then they remade Psycho, or they made a movie that was like Psycho, So it's going to be kind of that never-ending argument of, well, when back in my day, that kind of thing. And I totally get it. But I think it is important that while yes, there were no movies made after this one, this movie did introduce Freddy Krueger to an entire generation of people who probably were not interested in watching those older movies, if that's worth anything.
Well, and you also have one of my other really big bones to pick about this movie is Freddy Krueger was bigger. He was in the original movie, he was the boogeyman. The parents.
No. That's the other guy in the white mask.
When Nancy's mom is sitting down at the fire or the furnace, and she's pulling out his glove, and she's like, he's dead, and he was this horrible man, and we killed him. It was this like amazing emotional moment. You don't get that in this movie. If you're going to delve into this, like, they gave her the same name, Nancy, but then she's like, and he molested kids and he molested me, and then it was just like left. There was like no emotional finish to it. There was no. The movie was just. You could see where the movie could have been great, but it's like it was like, okay, we're going to do this with this character, and then we're going to leave it. And we're going to do this with this character, and we're going to leave it.
It's a matter of opinion. Like I said, I don't wholeheartedly hate remakes. I'm not like predisposed to hate them. And right. I just think this one didn't work for me. And that's right. That's cool. It's it is what it is. But we need to start wrapping this up, because we're gonna.
And hold on, if your generation wants to be introduced to a Nightmare on Elm Street, it's called a video store or Vudu or Netflix. They can be introduced to the good one.
My brother in Christ, there's no such thing as a video store anymore.
I know, right? I realized that as soon as I said it.
All right. Okay. So don't let this go too long, because otherwise we're going to have like a double-length episode.
Or just, listen to your Scream viewers. Just call me. I will send you a copy of the good movie.
Jesus Christ.
I would like to say, maybe I should have said this up front. The hosts of Listen to Their Screams do not always agree with the voices and opinions of in this podcast. So, please listen to your screams. Please don't contact my wife. Please don't do that. You can hit us on our official social medias where I can control who's being blocked. All right, so let's wind this down. And I feel like here wholeheartedly again, everybody's kept the floor except for Kayla. She kind of started it. So before we get out here, Kayla, do you want to add anything else?
I really like the original. I think we both Ike and I really like it. We think it's better than this remake.
Yeah,
100%.
Oh, well, see, that's a happy ending.
But I still feel like the remake is good. But then again, I am a lover of remakes. So I just like seeing other people's perspectives of the old stories.
Yeah. And I agree. There have been remakes that I have just thought in their own time are equal to the originals.
Yeah, and just because a couple of old fogies don't like it doesn't mean it doesn't have value and it wasn't successful, whatever else. It is what it is. It's just that it's an opinion, right? Whatever else. So, but all right, thank you, the wives, for coming on. Thank you, Monica, for steamrolling the conversation again. It's really going off. And
I'm going to start my own podcast where I come on after you and I just talk about how wrong you guys are.
Damn.
I got no comeback for that. I just don't even know.
I listened to your podcast from last week and Dave's like, well, I just thought this was the middle of the road. So I only gave it was just one tick under, the middle. So I gave it 2.5 and I'm sitting here going, well, 2.5 out of 5 stars is the middle. So
here's the thing. I'm not going to ever give anything a 0, so that doesn't really count. To me, the thing kind of starts at 1. Everybody needs to understand that every movie that Monica hates, she's like, I would have given it a half a scream. And I'm like, Jesus. I mean, wait, we better let Monica go because I'm pretty sure that Clint Eastwood's calling Monica to, remake that. And what's that movie, El Camino or whatever? That she's going to totally be yelling at people to get off her yard. Fuck you, Nightmare remake. Get off my yard. It's a fucking half scream.
Wasn't that Gran Torino?
I think it was.
That's right. Not El Camino. I couldn't think of what the movie was called off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure El Camino is the Breaking Bad movie.
Here's the thing. I was rolling with it, Ike. You didn't have to point it out. Most people would have been lost in my impersonation and wouldn't have cared that I messed up the movie title.
I appreciate it.
The next rebuttal is going to be why Ike's an asshole. So, I joke.
Why Ike has left the show. Why he was voluntold to leave.
I know the next show is going to be Dave and Kayla.
Well, Kayla, I probably should get more of a word in edgewise without Monica on it. So.
That's true.
All right. We need to wrap this up so me and I can get on to further discussions. It'll be less, less conflict.
Interesting. Oh.
All right, so let's wrap down the final edition of Wise Rebuttal because this may not ever see the light of day again. All right, thank you for coming on, Monica and Kayla. Monica, you and I are gonna have a talk later on.
That's okay. I'm gonna go watch El Camino while you finish up.
I bet you will. Please, when you yell at the clouds, don't do so very loudly because I am recording in the next room. All right. Well, goodbye, guys. Thank you for coming on.
Bye.
Bye.
Make sure you subscribe to Listen to Their Screams on your favorite podcast platform. Also, make sure you look us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok, and Slasher. All you have to do is look up Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2 and Screams, and you can find us there. Also, make sure you go and buy yourself a Listen to Their Screams t-shirt. You can find all of our shirts at tinyurl.com/Screams Shirts.
All right, and we are back from whatever the fuck that was. That was something. that was something. That was an interesting wives rebuttal. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Another one may or may not be on the horizon. We'll see.
We'll see. We kind of got to let the wounds heal a little bit from that one today.
Oh Lord.
No, kid, it's all good. All good. All in fun. All in good jest.
That's right. Yep. All in good humor. That's what we're here for. But now, this is the fun part. This is one of my favorite things we do on the show, truthfully. I love it when we do these countdowns because we're going to do our favorite movie countdown of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I just got to say, obviously, this is a great franchise. There are some really good movies in this one, and there are a couple of shitters, in my opinion. So
there truly are.
And Dave kind of mentioned it during the Wise Rebuttal. We did have to make some concessions on these, so this is sort of our combined list, right? But I will say that we can agree on most of these, so we're gonna go ahead and.
Well, there's always some give and take, right? Because we're not going to be spot on everything, and but I mean, I will say almost always when we do these countdowns in our lists, the top of the list is pretty good. We usually have pretty much the same favorites. It might be a little bit of a varying order, but it's pretty solid. And I mean, I guess to be fair, the bottom of the list is usually pretty, it's that middle that gets kind of hard. And that's hard even when you're doing it on your own. It's like, okay, I know my favorites. I know the ones I don't like. Oh, where do these other fall? And so it's difficult when you're splitting hairs in the middle.
It is.
But overall, I think a lot of our tastes kind of fall in the same. And I think we have the same what do we call it? The same view and approach to movies on the enjoyment and whatnot. And so it works out pretty well. But it's fun. It's fun because I like sitting down and thinking this through, right? Of what my favorites are and in what order that I like them in. And I find I'm a list guy, so I think it's a fun thing.
Absolutely, love a good list. But so we're going to start our list, and we're going to start from the very bottom because that's how we do things. We're going to start with our number 9 position, and that one's going to go to I can't say The Incredible, but it's going to go to the 2003 Freddy vs. Jason. This had a $30 million budget and pulled in a box office of $116 million. This is distributed, of course, by a New Line, and this is produced by Sean S. Cunningham from the Friday the 13th series, and is starring Monica Keena, Jason Ritter, and Robert Englund. This is 49th in the world ranking in 2003. Now, here's the deal. Freddy vs. Jason was intended to be this monumental film, right? It was teased at the end of the Friday the 13th. What was it? Jason's Dead. Is that the right one? Or Final Friday or something like that?
Yeah. It was like I think we talked about this a couple times. Like it was around 1988, right? Is when it really was teased. They thought they were going to get it to happen, and it never did. And it took 15 years.
Yeah.
And both properties to come under the same distributor to make it happen. And I don't know. Man, there's so many flaws with this movie in my eyes.
There is. It was Jason Goes to Hell. That was the one. It was in Jason Goes to Hell.
Yeah. So that's when the glove comes up at the end and
pulls it down.
It pulls. Yeah. You're right.
So obviously that was the kind of intention, right? That was the sort of birthing of this idea. And they've done a lot of comic books with this that are great. They've done a lot of crossovers in other media forms, and they're fantastic. But this film, in my opinion, it fell flat. As cool as the fight between Freddy versus Jason was, it kind of felt like it was just dreamed up by some teenager in their bedroom, right? The fight lacked substance. The film had all these stupid ass quips. I think the movie, while it is tolerable to an extent, it is by and large probably one of the worst, if not the worst, crossover horror movie that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know, it just wasn't good. Right, the story, it didn't work for me. And again, like we talked about with the new Nami, there was a lot of people in this I liked. Right, there was, a lot of actors. Again, I always talk about Supernatural. There were several people in this from that were Supernatural veterans, which leads me to believe that this movie was probably filmed in Canada. And it just, I don't know. It didn't work. It didn't seem like they came up with a very clever way to get to it. The whole, essentially Freddy using Jason to try to, till he got strong enough to try to get back at these. I don't know. It didn't work. There's just not a lot of redeeming qualities of this movie that I care for. I really don't enjoy it.
Yeah, it was honestly, it just kind of felt like your run of the mill 2000 slasher, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Now I will say the hype for the movie was spectacular, where they did the mock weigh-ins and interview things, and there was a lot of marketing and hype to it, and as there should have been, and as much as I don't know, as much as you want to love a movie where it's Freddy versus Jason, it just there's just not enough meat there to enjoy for me.
Nope. Negative.
So that moves us on, and again, this is another one, right? We gave some concessions, but this was right at the bottom, near the bottom for both of us, right?
Yep.
So this was, I have no problems with it being number 9, and so, which brings us on to number 8. In our opinion, it is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2: Freddy's Revenge from 1985. It was made on a $3 million budget, made $30 million domestic box office, distributed by New Line, produced by Robert Shea, starring Mark Patton, Kim Myers, and Robert Englund, of course. And it was the 30th grossing movie worldwide in 1985. And again, this movie, it's got parts, it's okay and whatever, but I think it's tough coming out of the first one. It's tough to follow up, and I don't think it was clever enough to avoid that sophomore slump there. It's kind of a flat movie, especially in my opinion, when it's sandwiched between the first one and Dream Warriors. It really looks pale in comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like there are some really cool things about this movie too. There are some great, effects. There are some great little nuggets in this. But when you have to look at the movie as an overall, it fell very flat. It's obviously better than Freddy vs. Jason. Nightmare 2, it's also kind of a controversial movie in a lot of ways. There's a whole documentary about it, but there's a lot of background stuff that makes it kind of to where I can't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
Even if the movie wasn't bad, there's a lot of background stuff that kind of makes it unenjoyable. So,
yeah,
Freddy's Revenge was just, it was no bueno. I purposely skipped it actually in this last rewatch because I didn't have an interest in watching it, and I had watched it probably in the last 6 months or so. So I was like, I'm just gonna skip it.
yeah.
But in any case, that was our number 8. Now we're going to move on to number 7. Now number 7 is a little contested. If you listened through to our wives rebuttal, you're going to know that this was a contested ranking a little bit. But number 7 was Nightmare, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake from 2010. This had a $35 million budget, $117 million in the box office. It's distributed by Warner Brothers, produced by Michael Bay, starring Jackie Earle Haley, Kyle Gallner, Rooney Mara, and Katie Cassidy. And it was 56 in the world ranking in 2010. So, obviously, from the Wise Rebuttal, you already know that I love this movie. I like remakes. I've talked a lot about how, as much as I appreciate a lot of these older movies and as much as I appreciate the impact and significance, there are a lot of cases where the remakes, in my opinion, have a lot more to provide and a lot more to give than the originals do. In some cases, not all cases. There are some pretty shitty remakes, but in my opinion, this wasn't one of them. I like the new Nightmare movie, not the new Nightmare, but the the newer Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it was very enjoyable to me. I like a lot of the actors in it. And I felt like the story, in my opinion, and I honestly kind of forgot to mention this, but I felt like it made made Freddy Krueger more of an evil character. Obviously he was an evil child murderer in the original films, but I felt like this even gave it like a further depth to his character to the degree that like I genuinely hated him, and like I wanted, because in some of the movies you're like, oh yeah, Freddy's kind of funny, but in this one I felt like he was just like a straight up like monster, and I liked it. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's not a whole lot to add, right? We just spent 20-something minutes talking about it and whatever else. This was the first kind of the highlight of our ranking where we really had to debate and give some concessions, because I'm going to be completely frank. In my personal rankings, this is dead last. I would rather watch Freddy versus Jason versus this, and that's saying something. But we conceded a little bit, right? And I gave it a couple spots because you liked it more. And to be fair, I had Freddy's Revenge Part 2 a little higher, so we brought it down because so we gave a little give and take on this. But I'm comfortable that it's in the bottom third, and that's and I'm happy with that because yeah, I don't like the movie. I kind of made that clear in the Wise Rebuttal, and I mean, there's nothing else really to add. I just it was just fell flat to me. It didn't work. It was kind of boring to me, and I just didn't enjoy it. And it is what it is. But I don't think we need to talk about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake anymore.
I don't think so.
It's like two-thirds of the podcast is gonna be on
Right.
episode's gonna be on that.
On the freaking 2010 remake, I
Yeah.
swear.
So let's move on to our number 6, which is Part 5, Dream Child from 1989. $8 million budget, $21 million box office draw, distributed by New Line, produced by Robert Shea, starring Robert Englund and Lisa Wilcox, and it was the 47th worldwide ranking in 1989. And man, I see this movie. Whoo! This is another one though that I just do not like. This movie, I feel like by the time you get into 5 and stuff, it's just getting a little too much out there. And I don't know. I didn't like the whole having Freddy's child thing and this and that and what have you, or whatever they were trying to do. And I don't. Is this the one where they dive into his background quite a bit? We're talking about his mom. Some of these in the middle blur with me.
I thought that was Freddy's Dead, because I thought Freddy's
Maybe
Dead
it is.
was. Yeah,
Well,
I
we'll
thought that
talk
one was a little more of a
but-
dive, but.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I don't like Dream Child. It just ish. And that kid, I don't know. He's not very good in it. I think it's. I will have to be sure. I will look it up while you're talking. I think the kid in Dream Child is the one kid that's in Jurassic Park at the beginning, where Alan Grant scares him talking about the Velociraptors.
Yeah.
I think that's the same kid, but I just don't know. I don't, and I could be wrong. Again, Dream Child gets very much blurred and blocked in my head. I just do not like the movie at all.
No, absolutely. For me, Dream Child is similar. It's a blur. I remember some things about it, and I don't necessarily hate it. Like, I wouldn't go as far to say like, oh, I fucking hate this movie, but it's another one of those movies that like it's almost just not memorable. You know what I mean? So it's not like I hate it. It's just I just don't remember the movie. I mean, it's hard to remember it, truthfully. But at the end of the day, I think that where it's at right now, kind of in the middle, it kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? It's not a memorable movie. It doesn't strike me as an overtly good or a bad movie. It's just kind of sitting there in limbo. And like you said, the context of it, like Freddy's trying to come back to the world, so he's like kind of like haunting, a baby inside of somebody's stomach or whatever, and all that stuff. I mean, it's weird, it's kind of creepy, but I don't know, it just kind of fell out of place, and not the best movie, but
Yeah, and I did look at it. It is the same kid from Jurassic Park, so. And no disrespect to him, right? I'm just saying. Yeah, I don't know. He didn't work in this movie, and that could not be completely on him. So, but It is. I just watched this movie a few days ago, and it's like I already am struggling to remember details of it because I don't know, for whatever reason, this movie just does not stick with me. So, but now we're starting to get to the nitty gritty here. Yeah, we're starting to get into our upper echelon. We're getting to the movies that are a little more enjoyable and more fun for us. So let's move on.
Yes, absolutely. Top 5. All right, so we are at number 5. Freddy's Dead, A Final Nightmare from 1991. Had a whopping $11 million budget, but with a very puny $35 million box office. It was distributed by New Line, produced by Robert Shea, starring Robert Englund and Lisa Zane. Slight note, music was done by Brian May, and it was 37th worldwide, ranking in 1991. Now, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, one of those movies, it is kind of one of those movies that I kind of forget about a little bit until I watch it, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I remember this movie. It is by no means a bad movie. I would even go as far to say that I do enjoy Final Nightmare. I do like kind of sort of the more, capable protagonist concept. I'm pretty sure this is the movie that also had a Johnny Depp cameo, wasn't it? He was on the TV.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this one was also in the 90s, so like a lot of 90s horror movies, they were trying to kind of take a leap into the new age, a leap into like, better technology. So, Freddy's in a video game at one point. So I do like kind of that concept of it. Freddy's Dead, again, is not a masterpiece by any means. We'll talk about masterpieces here in a minute. But this movie is by no means a masterpiece, but it's a very enjoyable movie. I think that's important, is that this is an enjoyable movie, whereas some of the other ones are kind of arguably not.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. I feel like they thought outside the box a little bit, and it works a little better in this one than it like what we talked about in Dream Child. I just think trying to be a little creative, it works. Yeah, it is. It's fun. Like the video game part is kind of cool. It's kind of fun, and I don't know. Yeah, it's just. I don't know what they'll say. I mean, there's nothing groundbreaking in it. There's nothing over the top that it's just like when you think Nightmare on Elm Street, it jumps at you as an immediate memory. But it's fun. And I mean, when you're considering that we have this dead in the middle, right? We have four worse, four better. To me, that is exactly where it falls. It's just right in the middle. It's fun enough, but it's just not super memorable, right? It's not one of the iconic ones from the franchise for me, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So that brings us then, as we get into the top four, some of the upper echelon here. Our number 4 is Part 4, Dream Master from 1988, a $6 million budget, drew $49 million box office, distributed by New Line, produced by Robert Shea, starring Robert Englund and Lisa Wilcox, and it was the 19th grossing movie in 1988. So, Ike, what do you think of Dream Master? We're starting to get to the movies now that I enjoy much more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do like Dream Master. Let me preface by saying I do like Dream Master. I do have a few gripes about it. Like, I don't like how they replaced Patricia Arquette's character with like some random actress, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then also the character that like Patricia Arquette played, which was Kristen, right? This was the movie they just like randomly killed her off and they brought in some other lady, right?
Yeah, correct.
Because there was like some other person who is the Dream Master versus just making Kristen the Dream Master because she had already previously, expressed the ability to be able to control dreaming or whatever. But it's fine. It's fine. I'm not mad about it. So Dream Master is a good movie. I like the concept. It has a lot of really cool visuals, especially during that final fight scene. Dream Master has probably one of the cooler like lead ups, if you will, being able to fight in the dream world and like really be able to fight is kind of like the over encompassing idea, right? And Dream Warriors, which we'll talk about here in a minute, you kind of get a little bit of a taste of like, yeah, you can fight back in Freddy's world if you try. But in this one, it really pumps that up because there's the final fight where she kind of takes all the totems from their, her fallen friends and kind of it's imbued with their power, which I thought was actually a really neat little thing. And yeah, it was really cool. Very cool movie. It was definitely flying hard after the success, I think, of Dream Warriors, but definitely 4 is a strong movie. I'll say that it is a strong movie.
Yeah, I think so too. And part of what makes it for me is that carryover from Dream Warriors, right? Some of that continuation of that story, some of the character carryover. I think that's why I like Dream Master more than some of these others. If it hadn't had that and it had been a little more independent, it probably wouldn't have worked as well for me. But I like that it was kind of a continuation from some of those concepts from Dream Warriors and some of those ideas and characters and things. And it just felt like, instead of having all these sequels with each one this new idea, this felt like it was more kind of building the franchise, right, and adding to something they'd already established, which I think I liked. And I think it sets it apart from some of these other movies for me, and why it's a little more memorable for me than like a Dream Child, which doesn't stick with me as well. I think it's some of that big picture, big story concept that they had in it. And I understand that I'm overhyping that a little bit to say it had this big picture, big concept, but I know what it is. But I mean, it's not like they wrote, a 1,000-page novel and then made this movie on it. But I like that, there was some carryover and some continuation of that story. And and I think it helped the movie. But yeah, it's definitely a fun movie. And and they're again, that's man. I mean, 1988. When you're talking, the 87, 88 time period, Dream Warrior, Dream Master. I don't know if there was a bigger rock star in the world than Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. I mean, he was everywhere at that time, and doing talk shows and doing everything. I mean, this was peak time for the popularity of Nightmare on Elm Street. It was pretty surreal.
Yeah.
But here we are moving to the top three, and this is again the top three are clear cut my three favorites. There's no arguing, right?
Right.
These three are my favorite three. I like Dream Master or whatever else, but there's a gap right here. From these three, I like them so much more than the others. And so that brings us to number three, which to me is probably one of the more clever and original movies in the franchise. Wes Craven's New Nightmare from 1994 had an $8 million budget, drew $20 million at the box office, distributed by New Line, produced by Marianne Madeleine, starring Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, and it was the 71st grossing movie, in 1994. This is one of those movies that is so enjoyable. It's so creative, and it's one of those movies that it's like they tried something new, right? This is coming out of Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare, and it's like they had to try something different, right? They wanted to try something different, and that's tricky because sometimes if you try it, it can fall completely flat. But this one, to me, didn't. It completely shatters fourth wall type things, so to speak. I mean, I guess not necessarily because it's not like they're winking at the audience or the viewers, but it's blurring the line between the real world, quote unquote, within the franchise, and the Freddy, the movie world. And I think it pulls it off. I think it does it well. It's funny, it's creative, and I love the concept that they've tried to say Freddy's real, right? He's a real thing. And I mean, we have Robert Englund in this movie who plays Freddy, but Freddy's something different. He's real. And I think that gives him less of a person type view as a story, a myth, a folk tale, a whatever you want to call it. It gives it more mythos of it's crossed lines, right? And it's become this real thing. And I'm sure you could dive so many levels probably looking at this movie as on a psychological level to people that are watching horror movies and starring in horror movies, and I'm sure that you could really break it down if you really probably want to psychoanalyze it all. But it's it's just fun. It's catchy, it's creative, it's cool to get these peeks at these people kind of trying to portray themselves a little more. I mean, we got to see, more Wes Craven on screen probably than you do in a lot of things. It's kind of cool. I don't know, man, this is just a very, very enjoyable movie to me to watch. I love watching this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super weird because, so let me preface it by saying I love this movie. This is probably one of my favorites. In fact, I'm pretty sure I had this as number 2 for me. I think you had this as number 3. So I had it as number 2. But I was willing to, because my number 2 and 3 were kind of like on the same level to me almost. But I did concede on our ranking. But I will say this. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, it's super weird to me because I never knew that it existed. Truthfully. I never knew that it existed until like 5 years ago I watched it. And mind you, I had seen the rest of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies probably at least 2 to 3 times each at this point in my life. So I had a really good basis of knowledge for Fred Krueger. And then I just never knew that New Nightmare existed. And then one day I was scrolling through Vudu and I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen this movie. What is this? And I'm like, holy shit, it's a Friday the 13th movie. Okay, holy shit.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Or Nightmare on Elm Street, sorry guys. And so
that'd be really weird, but
true. So that I sit down and I watch it and I'm like, holy shit, that was really, really good. That was better than I really ever anticipated. And in my opinion, this is the ultimate culmination of Wes Craven. This is his ultimate masterpiece, which is Freddy Krueger. And it's his ultimate masterpiece of making meta horror films. We've talked a lot about Scream and how Scream is probably one of the best meta slashers there is. But in my opinion, New Nightmare is a masterpiece in terms of a meta slasher because it literally is a well-established horror icon, and it is bringing him into the real world in a real way. And so, New Nightmare, fantastic. I could talk about it for days.
Yeah, I even like the tweaked look of Freddy, and they're at the end, towards the end of the movie, that third act of the movie, and that's a tricky line when you tweak something, especially someone who has such an iconic look, and they didn't abandon the look per se, but it is slightly altered, and so man, he looks like a badass in that third act. I think it's pretty cool, and it is though. The movie is so enjoyable. And it's just such a fun movie to watch and kind of lose yourself in, because you feel like the movie is losing itself within itself. And it's like okay, everybody, jump on, fuck fact and fiction. Let's just have a good time here and blur all the lines. And it works for me. It really does. And again, that's a tricky thing to do, and it doesn't always work when you try to do that stuff. And but yeah, he pulled it off masterfully, and it is great. Definitely top three for me. Like I said, I think our number ones were the same, and I just think I think our 2 and 3s were flip flop, but we had the same top three. But I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna move on to number 2, numero dos, and I'm pretty sure everybody can kind of guess where this is going, but just in case you can, number 2 is Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Dream Warriors and pretty much every conversation that we've ever had about sequels. And this movie had a $4 million budget, but it turned that into $44 million. Distributed by New Line, produced by Robert Shea, starring and returning Heather Langenkamp for the first time, as well as John Saxon and, of course, Robert Englund. And then 24th worldwide in 1987. So I just gotta say, it's super weird to me because you watch these movies, right, and you're watching it, and it's like a roller coaster. You start off super strong, you take a nosedive from hell, and then you shoot straight back up to the sun with Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors is one of those very rare moments where it's like it's an explosion. It's explosive. It is entertaining. It is. In my opinion, this Dream Warriors has some of the best, if not the best, effects in the entirety of the genre.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, there are scenes in this movie that I'm just like, how did they do that practically? I mean, the television set, that's a fantastic kill. I think hands down one of the creepiest things that I've seen, and makes my skin crawl every time I see it, is when the kid he's made into a puppet. And like he cuts his like wrists and legs and like pulls the tendons and shit out. And I'm like, I was eating breakfast because I rewatched Dream Warriors this morning. I was eating breakfast and I was like, oh, come on, man.
Anybody that knows me knows Dream Warriors is absolutely one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I mean, there's Dream Warriors, there's Sleepaway Camp, Reanimator, Jason Takes Manhattan, all these odd kind of weird. To me, if our number one was just not so iconic and just cinematically, to me, it's just perfect, right? It is just perfect. But to me, Dream Warriors is the epitome of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It is the most iconic of the movies. It is, when people think Nightmare, I think a lot of their thoughts are of stuff that really just peaked in Dream Warriors. And Dream Warriors culturally at the time was unreal. Number one of the best soundtracks of a horror movie ever. I mean, you got freaking Dawkins with Into the Fire and, of course, Dream Warriors. Unreal. 2 great songs right there. Not only that, but you could turn on freaking MTV, see Robert Englund in a music video for Dawkins' Dream Warriors in rotation. That was surreal. That was so cool to someone who liked horror movies to see that. The name, the Dream Warriors, is perfect, right? It is perfect for what this is, and I just love everything about it. These kids that are in this place, this institution, because they think that they're having these mental conditions, but all it is their dreams being haunted and terrorized, and there's not anything wrong with them, right? It's Freddy, and coming to terms with that and learning to tap into, okay, when you're in your dreams, what are you, right? What makes you strong? What do you dream about? Let's take that and let's utilize that, right? There again, this is one of those movies. I know it is a cheesy 80s horror movie, and people will dismiss it for, because it's got some humor or whatever. To me, there's so many levels to this movie of that can be taken, right? Of introspection and finding, your strengths and leaning on those instead of, leaning into your failures and your weaknesses. To me, there's a lot of just little subtle things that are in there like that. And maybe it's just because I love the movie so much that I see that stuff. But this is hands down one of my favorite horror movies, probably one of my favorite movies, period, of all time. And again, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, this is just a masterpiece of film, right? That should be spoken with Casablanca and Gone with the Wind, and it should be, it should be. No. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying, number one, it's enjoyable, it's fun, start to finish. Number two, as far as a horror movie and effects and things like that, it's groundbreaking, right? They took, most of this stuff didn't exist, right? You had to invent stuff, invent ways to do this, and they did it, and it looks great, and it looks spectacular, and I don't think, I understand now it's easier to do more with less, and I get that, and that's fine, but man, that doesn't mean that there should not be some props and respect for the guys that had to do it the hard way and still put out something so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, this was prime Robert Englund, where he really hit his groove and knew how he was playing Freddy, right? He had 2 movies under his belt. He was in his third. Again, like I said earlier, he was a rock star. Everybody knew Freddy, right? And so they had to give him some of that comedy and some of that clever and the one-liners, because he was the bad guy, but people thought Freddy was cool, and people liked Freddy. So they had to give him that bad, cool, aspect. And I can't sing the praises of this movie enough. I love Dream Warriors. And again, to me, I think it is the most iconic movie in the franchise. I think it is for better or worse, if someone says, what is Nightmare on Elm Street? Talking about the original, maybe, the original films. What can I watch that is the best encompassing of the whole thing? Show them Dream Warriors. And, and again, I know we have it at number 2, but that's only because our number 1, I mean, our number 1's just perfect, right? There's just really not too many flaws with it, which everybody I'm sure knows what that is right now, but but I love Dream Warriors. Love it. And I can sit here and just babble on for hours about it.
Absolutely. And I have to add one thing before we move on. You will never get a more perfect line than Robert Englund saying, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," and then slamming this woman's head into the TV. Like, come on. How can you make a movie better than that? You could have just shown me that one scene. I'd be good. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, playing off, right, what was this girl's dream, right? She wanted to be an actress. She wanted to be on television. So, I mean, that's the concept, right? He knows what your dreams are, and he's going to use those against you. And it's getting, like I said, by the time we got to Dream Warriors, it's not a seeking revenge type thing or whatever so much as just Freddy he's just haunting. He's just having fun screwing with people and, people that get looped into this thing. So I love it. I love the movie so much. But I also love our number 1, which if you're doing a countdown and you're checking off your list, you know that our number 1 is the original Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. Made on $1 million budget, it grossed $57 million box office, distributed by New Line, produced by Robert Shea, starring Heather Langenkamp, Johnny Depp, Robert Englund, John Saxon. It was the 40th movie worldwide, 1984. And I know it's hard to believe in 1984, $57 million was only 40th, but movies were big in the mid 80s. There were some monstrous movies. Again, this movie lays the foundation, sets the story. As far as a horror movie, especially a slasher horror movie, I just don't think you get much more perfect than the original Nightmare. I mean, the story's great. It plays on a genuine fear of people that people have, right? And it also plays on that old wives' tale or whatever. I don't know how you would define it, of if you die in your sleep, you die in real life, kind of, right? People have been
Right.
saying that for generations, right? And whatever else. And that, oh, you'll always wake up right before you die, and if you don't, that's it. You always hear that, right? And so it takes all these things that plays in, and everybody has nightmares, everybody has bad dreams, and this kind of takes that and runs with it. Well, what if there's more to that, right? What if there's somebody, or could be somebody, causing some of that could utilize that, and then gives him a backstory, and it's just, man, it's so great. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of take, assume for yourself, right? They wanted to, the intent was to lean more into the, that he was molesting children, but they didn't. They were worried about putting that in there because of some world circumstances and things that were happening. I believe it was in a school in England at that time. I think I read where this huge thing got unveiled, and they thought, ooh, maybe it's not in good taste to really lay into that. So they just kind of took it out, but still left the insinuation where, while they don't say it, you pretty much know that's what's going on there. And it's just, man, it is such a great movie. It's got such a great final girl in it. And as you look at it with today's eyes, and you see young Johnny Depp, you can say, oh yeah, that kid's got, he's got something, right? He just seems cool and smooth and natural in it. Even at this, as a dorky kid, it still works. It's just to me, as far as an 80s slasher type horror movie, I don't find flaws. I think it's just perfect.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, what more can you say about the original Nightmare on Elm Street other than this movie, start to finish, is probably one of the most perfect horror films of all time. I know that I could be critical of some, movies, especially original movies, cough, cough, Friday 13th Part 1. But there is not a more perfect, I think, entry into the horror genre than Nightmare on Elm Street. I would even go as far to say is that as much as I love Halloween, and the original Halloween is always going to be my favorite, if you were to compare them in respect to their genres and to their series, I think Nightmare on Elm Street is more explosive than the original Halloween.
To me, it does what you've always talked about with Friday the 13th, right? You've always said that, hey, let's take the first three and make it one movie, and just kind of have some of that backstory just hinted at and some flashbacks. That's kind of what this does, right?
Yeah.
It instead of making one or two movies showing Freddy Krueger in the real world, it starts with okay, bam, here we are, and we're gonna slowly unveil and give flashbacks and story telling you how we got to there, instead of making a whole movie about it. So
yeah, absolutely, and that is a very good point. It definitely does. It does something that a lot of horror series can't do. And obviously, Robert Englund is perfect as Freddy. Robert Englund is a master of horror, and we watched the documentary, and you get to kind of see some of the inside of how Robert got into his into the style of what he wanted to do with Freddy. And it's just, Robert Englund is such a talented actor, and I think that this, among other films that he have done, it really proves how talented he is. And and it's just it's incredible because this movie started a legacy that Wes Craven and Robert Englund, in my opinion, built, and it's going to be an ongoing legacy. It's just, I don't think anybody's ever going to forget about Nightmare on Elm Street. It's just so cool.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I think it's a movie that will continue just generation to generation. People will discover it because, I mean, Freddy Krueger has crossed into the pop culture consciousness. It is, he has, as a character, superseded his franchise, and people know who Freddy is that don't even necessarily watch horror movies, right? And that's just the way it is, right? You have, the Freddy Krueger, the Michael Myers, the Jason Voorhees, especially those three that have kind of crossed over where people know who they are, even if they don't watch the movies, typically. And even, they may not watch the movies, but they still, most of them will know Freddy Krueger was in Nightmare on Elm Street. And that's something to be said. And when you've crossed that line. And again, that's our countdown of our top 9. But again, what we're talking about and how this has superseded it plays heavily. Of course, there's Wes Craven. Of course, there's a story and everything else. But a lot of that success and a lot of that weight rides on the man under the makeup and Robert Englund, We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss Robert Englund and the upcoming documentary on him. Listen to Their Screams is now a Fangoria collaborator. Get 20% off your order at shop.fangoria.com by using the promo code LISTEN2SCREAMS at checkout. That is listen, the number 2, and screams. Or you can click the link in the show notes. All right, we're back here on Listen to the Screams, and we're going to do a pretty quick review. I don't want to give a lot of details and go too deep into it because I want people to really watch the documentary and really get the details and the information themselves. We'll maybe hit a couple high notes here, but the documentary is called Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares: The Robert Englund Story. The documentary is getting ready to be released on Screambox on June 6th, which happens to be Robert Englund's birthday. So happy birthday, Robert Englund! If you're listening, I'm sure you just tune in to hear two dudes talking about your franchise. But then the movie will also be released in Steelbook and Blu-ray on July 25th. It features interviews with Robert Englund and his wife Nancy, as well as fellow genre icons Lynn Shay, Eli Roth, Kane Hodder, Tony Todd, Adam Green, Bill Moseley, Heather Langenkamp, and more. The documentary follows Englund's career from his early days in Buster and Billy and Stay Hungry, where he starred with a very young Arnold Schwarzenegger, to his big break in the 1980s as Freddy Krueger, and then to his directorial debut with 1988 horror film 976 Evil, to his iconic acting status in current roles such as Netflix's hit series Stranger Things. Boy, that's a mouthful. And again, but that is a long way to say Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger. He's spectacular as Freddy Krueger, but man, there's a lot more to Robert Englund than just Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
And you take it for granted when you watch him as Freddy Krueger of just how talented Robert Englund is. But what I would, like I said, I don't want to go into a whole lot of details, but my biggest takeaway from this documentary is this, and it's something that I really like when I hear it. Robert Englund, just as talented as he is and experienced as he is and everything else, man, he is just, on all accounts, by all people's firsthand accounts in this documentary, he is just a great guy. Right?
Yeah.
He is so kind. And all these people said the same thing. All these young actors in these horror movies said the same thing. Here I am with Robert Englund, who's an icon, and all he cared about was helping me. And he would come up, and I don't know how many actors in this documentary said he would come up and set me at ease, right? And tell me, hey, don't worry about, you're gonna be great. We're gonna have fun. Just relax. Or he would come up to them and say, hey, I really like your work. I saw you in this movie. And they thought, what the hell? No one saw that movie. How did Robert Englund see that movie? and they, people say that, right? He is such a film fan. I know there was a couple people that said it in the documentary that they don't know if there's anybody they've ever met who's watched more films than Robert Englund. And to me, that shows that he is doing what he's doing because of a passion and a love. And I like when guys do that, right, where they pass the torch and they help others, and that was so spectacular. And the other thing that I really picked up in this documentary that really hit home with me, especially today as we're recording, today is the anniversary of the release of the original Star Wars movie in 1977. Did you catch the part, Ike, where Robert Englund said that he auditioned to play Han Solo?
I did. And wasn't he the one that he gave a script to
Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill for that film.
Yeah, he auditioned for Han Solo, didn't work out. He played it differently than what they wanted. I love Robert Englund, but let's be real. Harrison Ford was Han Solo. They did right. And
right.
But yeah, when he was leaving, he saw I'm not sure what they call it. There was a term he used, a reader. I don't think it was a full script, but it was like, I think it was sample lines to audition with, is by just what I got, right? Maybe just a segment of the script. And it was for Luke Skywalker, and he picked it up, was looking at it, and essentially took it with him. Apparently at this time, he was really good friends with Mark Hamill. And Mark Hamill was always over at his place, hanging out, having dinner. And he saw Mark Hamill that evening and gave it to him and said, hey, I really think you'd be great for this, and you should audition for this. And he said right then, Mark Hamill called his agent and said, hey, get me an audition for this. So and I have no reason to believe it's not a true story. If this is true, Robert Englund is the reason Mark Hamill auditioned and became Luke Skywalker. That is wild to me. That is cracks me up at how things like that work out in Hollywood. I mean, because it's, can you envision anybody else playing, Luke Skywalker but Mark Hamill? And it just blows my mind. But again, there it is. The guy didn't get a part, but helped somebody else into an iconic role. I mean, it's just, just great. But again, I'll wrap up, Mike, and let you talk. But I really enjoy the documentary. I love documentaries, right? Especially when it's about something I'm passionate about, like horror movies. And obviously Robert Englund is worthy of a documentary that is done right. And this was done right because one of the good things is how it talks to so many actors. It talks most with Robert Englund, right? Yeah. It's a pretty much full career interview with him throughout this thing. I can't recommend it enough. I think this was a great documentary. I think it was, what was it, 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. And it's great every minute of the thing. I highly advise people go to watch it. Like, what did you think about the documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. I do have to agree. Pardon me. I think that the biggest takeaway that I have from this movie is that Robert Englund is just honestly, just a really genuinely good dude. I mean, basically the entire, documentary is talking about how Robert Englund was just this normal guy, basically, who was just a really good actor. And he just was just this dude who basically helped everybody. I mean, he had a lot of influence on some of these young actors who were, acting in these movies with him. And, and while he was carrying on this legacy, and they do talk a lot about how, how stagnating it can be to be kind of typecast as this, person,
Yeah.
And they do talk about that a lot. And it, and that part of it can be unfortunate, of course. But, I think the big thing is that Robert, he talked a lot about how, this movie is foundational. And in a lot of ways, it's made huge motions and huge waves for his life. And, and it's really intriguing, and, obviously not to dive into too much, but it's just really intriguing to hear him talk and, talk about this ride that he's been on in the acting world. And
yeah, I mean, didn't he just pretty much say that it came to the point where he felt such a weight, right? And so shackled by playing this role. And didn't he just pretty much say one day his wife said, "Oh, boo-hoo, get over it." I mean, it's like, come on, there's worse things than this. And he's like, "Yeah, I guess you're right." I mean, it's like, and so he's like, I just had to let it go. And,
well, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, and that's the truth. I mean, it's hilarious, but it's like, yeah, I mean, what do you, I guess not, he wasn't crying about it, but it's kind of like that situation. Like, what are you crying about? You're one of the most famous horror icons on earth. You know what I mean? But
yeah, but I mean, I understand. Like I said, he was, such a talented actor. There's so much more he could have done, right? I mean, he could have done some unbelievable parts, but he wasn't going to get those because of, who he was and what he done. And it is what it is. And, that's what happens, right? That's what happens, when you get in a role that's so iconic, but and the other side of it is, I mean, say what you want, you'll never be forgotten, right? I mean, it'll always be Freddy Krueger in people's minds. And when they picture him, it's always going to be him. And so, yeah, I mean, I do. I've never been in that position, but I can understand how it's frustrating, especially to someone who enjoys acting so much and really would have liked to have stretch his wings and done some other things. But it is what it is. I mean, there are pitfalls to certain kinds of successes. And I think, I think all in all, though, it's okay. And I think, and I'm just happy that he's kind of come to peace with it. And that's in no way to say he ever resented the role or resented doing it. He did not give that indication in any way, shape, or form. There was a whole other side to this thing where everybody said they've never seen somebody more giving to fans with his time and attention at conventions and so on than he is. That's not to, I know we're saying this like he lamented this. No, it's not lamenting. And he didn't, he doesn't, he enjoyed the role. He loved the role. He's very appreciative of the role and the fans.
Right.
It's just that, there's that part of him of, you always think, what if, what if I could have done this or, tried out for this? And, you always think that. So, but again, I would highly advise people to watch this when it comes out. If you're a horror movie fan, if you're like the Nightmare on Elm Street, this is, to me, it's a must view. You just have to watch it. And it does talk about, his other roles and other things he's done. it essentially goes through his career, all the way through from the beginning up, and hits, pretty much the majority of the highlights of the movies he's done. Not even just Nightmare. I mean, so it talks a lot about the different things he does, including, as we said, up to his recent appearance in the Stranger Things series and everything else. So, but I think it was great. It's a very well done documentary, very thorough, and again, I think it gave what seems to be a very accurate portrayal of Robert Englund, as well as celebrating his career. I think it was well done.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
But again, that will be out on Screenbox on June 6th, which is, again, Robert Englund's birthday. So that's pretty cool how they put it out on his birthday and everything else. So go check it out. Once again, it is called Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story. Screenbox June 6th. Like we said, highly advise it. So, Ike, we've ran kind of long, had a kind of a long episode. Hopefully everybody sticks with us. Hopefully everybody has enjoyed our discussion of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I will say, we get good feedback on these franchise episodes. They typically run a little longer. People don't seem to mind that because they kind of like where we talk about the whole series. So next episode, though, we're going to discuss a movie that's getting ready to come out in theaters called The Boogeyman, an adaptation of a Stephen King story getting ready to hit theaters. And we're going to talk about that on our next episode here. But Ike, before we close out and get out of here, anything that you want to add?
It's prime time, bitch.
Welcome to prime time, bitch. So until next time, when we'll be back here on Listen to Their Screams, make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you follow us on social media. When we join you again, Ike will be on the other side of vacation, and he'll be rested and primed and ready to go and talk about horror movies more with all of us. So until then, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and have many pleasant nightmares.